I want to welcome you to what promises to be a pretty provocative and illuminating evening. We have four very, very, very creative people on the panel today. We have one who is still in transit, but he'll be here soon. I couldn't help but reflect on my own initiation into presidential politics as we face this new election. I can scarcely believe that it's only 2 more weeks, that it's been only 4 years since the last one. When I went away to college in 1967, I was scarcely enrolled for a month when Vice President Hubert Humphrey came to campus. It was during the anti-war years of protest. The Vietnam War was raging. All of us had friends and relatives who were either serving, who had passed away. So we were very, very interested in making our views known to Vice President Hubert Humphrey when he came to campus. We made our hand placards. You know, there were no computers in those days. And we marched in icy cold sleet, chanting, "End the war in Vietnam and bring the brothers home." Less than 6 months later, I was in the street again, this time supporting Hubert Humphrey because he was running against Richard Nixon for president. So the complexities of elections, the ways that we have to make choices was made clear to me at that early moment. Before we go on, I do want to pay tribute to 2 presidential candidates that we lost this week. The emphasis of the day is social justice. Both of these were champions of social justice. Russell Means ran for president on the Libertarian ticket in 1987. Not many people know that. And George McGovern was the peace candidate in 1972. Someone else we campaigned for who also lost. These are interesting times. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator this evening, Mark Sawyer. Again, I thank you all for coming to this very, very important session.
Thank you, Belinda. Can you guys hear me okay? That's good? Huh? Get closer? Okay. Okay, much better. Right, got it? Okay. Adjusting the volume is part of my misspent youth as a DJ, but. So I think today, one of the things we want to do is raise a set of complex questions about the election, the upcoming election, how people have come together to vote, to get organized, what the issues are going into the voting place, which is coming up very quickly. But I also want to push the panelists to think about the day after. I think for the communities here, we do have a lot of focus on election day. And we saw in 2010 how we let the Tea Party rule the day after, and what the implications of that were. And so we really want to think about, to a certain degree, what we're going forward. And we have but as well as what are the issues leading up to the election, and get some analysis, some things to illuminate the issues here. We have a great panel representing a broad set of perspectives as well as communities while we're here. And I'm going to try and stitch that together along with audience participation, gathering some questions, reframing, rediscussing, and motivating. And I don't see myself as a moderator, but as an inciter to discussion. So our first panelist is David Reeve. He is the Director of Development and Government and Public Affairs for the Kedren Mental Health Center. He is responsible for developing, coordinating, implementing public policy initiatives and community education strategies. He also monitors and engages in significant local, state, and national mental health issues that are closely linked to the agency's mission and various programs. He's not here yet, but he will arrive. You all know his work. Lalo Alcaraz. I follow him on Twitter too, where he's extremely hilarious and gives me hours of joy. And Lalo will be here shortly, and I'll try and do something more formal. We also have Dennis Liu. He is an associate professor of sociology at Poly Pomona. He graduated from Harvard in government and received his PhD from the University of California at Santa Cruz. He's been a journalist and a photo editor, and he's the co-editor and the author of Impeach the President, The Case Against Bush, and Cheney. That wouldn't have been a bad idea. The next, our final panelist, but certainly not our least, is Jolie Proudfit. Jolie Proudfit is a descendant of the Pachanga band of Luiseño Mission Indians. She holds a PhD, MA and a PhD in political science with an emphasis in public policy and American Indian studies from Northern Arizona University, and a BA in political science with an emphasis in public law from California State University, Long Beach. She works at Cal State San Marcos and is here to discuss American Indian issues. So now that we have our panelists, I really want to start them off with, they're going to make a quick statement, but then for just like a minute and a half to sort of organize the election. I'm going to start with Jolie and work my way down the panel. But I'd also like them to think about, I'm going to set up my first question, which then will come down and then go back, which is I want them to think about both the two top issues related to communities of color that they've seen that have been discussed in terms of the election, and then the two top issues that have not been discussed. But I'd like on the second one, I'd like to sort of push beyond just this is what we didn't talk about in the debates, but think about why those particular issues aren't discussed and how we might reframe them in ways that in the future they would be central to things like the presidential debates. But that's on the second round, so I'm just giving you some time to think about it before I throw it to you. But that's gonna be the first thing that I pose to everyone. But first we'll start with Jolie. Thank you.
Miriam. As he stated, my name is Dr. Jolie Proudfit. I'm from the Pachanga Band of Luiseño Indians, from the Nyesica clan, the Scraper People clan, from Temecula. You guys know where Temecula is, and you've probably seen our billboards out there. Prior to the gaming boom in the late 80s, a lot of folks didn't know there were California Indians still here. We have 109 tribes in the state. We have the largest urban Indian population in the country in Los Angeles and San Francisco counties. We have over 550 American Indian tribes that reside here in the continental US. We are the First Peoples. We have, some of us have tri-citizenship, most of us have dual citizenship, which is enrolled members of our tribes, members of the state, members of the federal government, so we can vote in a number of different elections. American Indians were not officially granted the right to vote until 1924. But for many of us, it took until 1975 to officially have the right to vote. We had states like Arizona saying, you don't pay state tax, you don't vote in state elections. And unfortunately, it doesn't appear that we've come very much further, because some of the critical issues facing us today have to deal with things like voter suppression in the area of IDs, identification cards, okay? There are 6 pivotal states for us that we're taking a look at, where American Indians also can impact a vote. There are about 5 million people in the United States that identify as American Indian. And while we're only 1% of the entire population, we can swing a vote. And we can swing a vote in places like Arizona. We can swing votes in counties. And government, where it really matters, is locally. So these are serious issues, not just for American Indians, but for others, as the changing demographics are happening in the United States. The status quo is a little nervous. and they're looking at ways to suppress that change. Change is coming. Change is good. That's what they've been telling us for years.
Right.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all of you being here. I was told that I had up to 5 minutes, so I'm going to max out on 5 minutes at the beginning here. Elections are not what most people believe them to be, an opportunity for the people to decide who will represent them and what the overall policies are going to be. Elections are not even the place where people get to decide who the lesser evil will be. What elections do instead is provide the fig leaf of a public approval and legitimation for policies that the 1% have been implementing and plan to implement anyway. If you're interested in social justice, then you cannot afford to get ensnared in the trap of elections. Consider, for example, what America would look like today if Obama had not won in 2008, but McCain had won. Would President McCain have continued and escalated the use of drones, kept Guantanamo open, and retained rendition? Would he have allowed torture to continue, refused to prosecute torturers, bailed out Wall Street, be threatening Iran, deport more immigrants than Bush did, signed the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, and personally request of Congress that they include American citizens in the NDAA, allowing the military, based merely on an accusation, to hold someone indefinitely without charges, and suspending all of their rights and stripping them of their citizenship? Would McCain have continued suspending habeas corpus, concede ground to the pro-lifers, escalated the warrantless surveillance that Bush began to truly gargantuan dimensions today, permit the ongoing mass incarceration of minorities, refuse to put single-payer health insurance on the table, and allow the gap between the 1% and the rest to widen ever more? Would McCain be going aggressively after whistleblowers even more than Bush? And if your answer is yes to these questions, then you probably also know that all of these things have occurred under Obama. I didn't mention in this list that it would be publicly declared presidential kill list under President McCain, because I'm not sure that McCain would have gotten away with that the way Obama has. And McCain would not have declared his recognition of the danger of global warming, unlike Obama. But what Obama and McCain share together would be a refusal to do anything really significant to mitigate global warming. What is meaningful in politics is not who holds public office or their party affiliation, but what interpretive frames dominate the society. In the 1960s, for example, the ruling circles argued that the chief issue was crime in the streets and law and order. And the social movements of the day declared that the chief issue was instead social justice. Because of the strength and determination of the social movements of that time, social justice was for a thrilling and important several years the dominant interpretive frame in our society, not what public officials and pundits wanted it to be. To step back here for a moment and take the long view, as I wrote in my book, my more recent book, Globalization, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, Globalization and the Demolition of Society. I want to read you something from it. To grasp what is going on, we have to probe beneath the surface to the underlying forces in play. The problems of capitalism that are now being expressed are not simply the product of a few or even a lot of greedy, corrupt, and short-sighted business figures. They are not primarily the result of poor monitoring by the Federal Reserve and the federal government. They did not arise principally because of an inattentive media. They are not fixable through a set of adjustments or through electing one party over the other or installing into power one individual or another. They are not mainly the result of the fault of a mall-obsessed, savings-allergic public. These are systemic problems. Life will never again be the same as the life Americans have known for the last several generations. But recognizing what is up is not so easy. Systems do not change because you put a new face in the White House or new faces in Congress. Unquote. GOP pollster Frank Luntz said something very revealing in the fall of last year. This was before the Occupy movement was violently evicted from its encampments. He confessed that the Occupy movement was, quote, frightening him to death because it was changing the way Americans think about capitalism, unquote. Note what he didn't say. He didn't say, I'm frightened to death that people will vote for Democrats. He said he was frightened to death about the way this social movement was changing public opinion. The battle for public opinion, what I was saying earlier about the interpretive frame, is where the action is. Elections are a means by which public opinion is shaped to suit the purposes of those who run things. If we want something else, then we have to puncture the election charade and build an alternative pole of opinion, not beholden to one party or another, a movement that bases itself on facts, not spin, and that tells people the whole unvarnished truth, not convenient fictions. That is the only way to usher in a new, just world, and the only way to truly engage people politically and mobilize them as an independent force rather than some artificial version of democracy. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back. I'm a UCLA grad myself. I loved it here so much, and I kind of couldn't figure out where Lot 5 was. But it's good to be back, and I have to admit, I'm a little nervous. I don't know why. Someone told me, oh, don't worry, it's a whole bunch of students. But I don't know why, but I don't know, students are making me more nervous. And also, we have Professor Hunt here, who, when I was in your seat, I listened to his lectures, and I heard him on several panels when he was up here. So it's a little, so excuse me if I stutter a little. But I'm also here because, not because of my day job, but also because I'm part of APCON, which is the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council. I'm a board member there and vice president of policy. And actually, I was asked to comment a little bit more on the Asian American community and the Asian American perspective when it comes to elections and politics. So I'm gonna make it a little bit more narrowly focused, if you don't mind. Just to start off, I was hoping some of my other panelists stated some stats, so I don't have to, but I'll give you some boring numbers real quick. Nationwide, 6% of the US population, or 17.3 million, are Asian Pacific Islanders. Nationwide, there was Asian Americans had the largest growth at 46%, followed by Hispanics at 43%, African Americans at 15%, white Anglo at 1%, and the total population growth of the United States was 10% from the last census. Now, even though I say, just as a footnote, even though I say Asian Americans had a higher growth rate than Latinos, when it comes to real numbers, obviously there are more Latinos. Just to give you some hard numbers in California, population of 37.3 million, Asians are 13.6, and that's not including the 3.6 Pacific Islanders, so that's where they get about 16%. White Anglos make 39.7, Latinos 38.1, African Americans 6.6. And you know what, actually, I forgot to mention, I have some of these, a lot of copies that I put out in the front. Yesterday I went to an excellent panel discussion where my friend Stuart Quo, he kind of did all the stats for me, so you guys don't have to write it down. You guys could take a copy that's outside. And just real quick, for County of LA, you have Latinos at 48%, white at 28%, Asians at 14%, and African Americans at 8.3%. Now, that's population. That's just gross numbers. Now, when it comes to civic engagement, if you look at the Anglo-white population, the percentage of voting age populations who are citizens, okay, it's not all, but everyone who's 18 and over who's of eligible age is 98%. Percentage of those who are citizens of voting age who are actually registered to vote is 74%, and from the 70% who voted in the last presidential election was 90%. Okay, for African Americans, it's 94. People of voting age is 94%. voting age populations who are citizen, is 94%. From those who are registered are 70%, and from all those who are registered, 93% voted. For Hispanics, percentage of voting age populations who are citizen is 63%. From those who are registered is 59%, and those who voted was 84%. For Asian Americans, percentage of voting age population who are citizen is 68%. From those who are registered to vote is 55%, and from those who are registered and voted was 86%. So just to give you just a quick hard numbers. Sorry, this will be the last of the numbers. Quick hard numbers in California. You guys following along? Yeah. Okay. Tell me if I speak a little too fast. In California, hard numbers, 17.5 million registered voters. This is not the population, just registered voters now. 65% or 11.3 million are white, Anglo, non-Hispanic. 22 or 3.8 million are Latino. 9% or 1.6 million are Asian American, and 4% or 720,000 are African American. Okay? So, for example, on the November 2011 governors, I'm sorry, not governors, the presidential. Well, no, wait, 2011, what was that? Special. In the 2011 election turnout for the special, about half, 49.9% turnout, 786,000 Asian Americans voted, which accounted for 7.7 voters. For the Latino community, of the 21.3 registered voters, there was a 47.2% turnout that accounted for 17% of all voters. And for African Americans, which is 2.6% of the registered voters, with the 49.5% turnout and accounted for 2.2% of the voters in the state of California. So if you could kind of see how the numbers work. Now, what do all these numbers mean? Just to, nationwide, Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority group. And again, the caveat, right? The Latinos in real numbers are obviously much larger. And like the Latino population, Asian Americans are approximately over 50% foreign born. That's why you have a drop off in when it comes to citizens and population. Then in general, largely election is like for state of California or nationwide, the more important the Asian vote is. And there are several reasons why, because Asian Americans are all scattered and are not really concentrated in any one individual area. For voter turnout, for those who are already registered to vote, are basically, the Asian Americans are at par with the other groups. So for example, the presidential 2008 voter turnout was 90% white. These are people who are registered to vote, okay? And 90% white, 84% Latino, 93% black, and 86% Asian. That was the presidential, that was the first time Obama ran. That was a huge election. And just to show you, in 2011, actually that was the gubernatorial, right, 2011? It was a 2011 gubernatorial. The turnout was, it's a non-presidential year, so yeah, I know I get confused with all these elections too. 61% of the white Anglo voted from the registered voters, 47% of Latinos, 49% of blacks, and 50% of Asians, okay? So where the Asian American community lacks is actually voter registration. So compared to the other communities of citizens of voting age registered to vote is generally in the 70 to 75% rate. But for Asian Americans, it's 55%. And of course, Latinos are not that far behind, but Asian Americans are lagging there. So because of that, it results in scenarios such as, like in the county and the city of LA, where the Asian American population is much larger than the African American population, if you could recall the numbers I gave you earlier. Yet, when it comes to registered voters and actual voting, African Americans outnumber Asian Americans. And same goes for population-wise, Latinos, you could say are majority in LA County, but when it comes to voter registration and voting, it's in the 30s. So so the importance of civic participation is actually Rafe Sonnenschein said it best. For example, in the city of LA mayoral election, where the Jewish population makes only 6% of the population of LA, they made 18% of the vote, of the mayoral vote. Because not everyone, remember the voter turnout is not everybody votes, so your vote matters. And for a community with 6% of the population, they accounted for 18% of all votes cast. So hope is not lost. There tends to be a higher vote count in areas of greater Asian American populations. That's not just true for Asian Americans, but it goes for any community, any minority groups where there's more of a condensed concentration, there's more activity. And/or in areas where there's high advocacy or at least there's some legacy of voting, such as in the Bay Area for Asian Americans. Now the reasons for this, I'll wrap it up. Reasons for this, my political consultant friends will state that it's because they're doing such a good job of targeting Asian voters. Maybe the case. Or there might be higher voter education and advocacy in those areas, and/or redistricting. So I just want to end with the potential for the Asian American population is there, and that's why all the political pundits agree that next to the Latino population, the Asian American vote will be the next political wave. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the express joy of being joined by Lalo Alcaraz. We got here like right on time. Like couldn't have timed it better.
I'm always on time.
He is the creator of the first nationally syndicated politically themed Latino daily comic strip, La Cucaracha. He is the author of Migramos political cartoons on immigration, of which I have a bunch hanging in my office of frames from. He's the co-host of KPFK Radio's wildly popular satirical show, The Pocho Hour of Power, heard Fridays at 4 p.m. in LA on 90.7. Also followed him on Twitter, I do, and enjoy his back and forth. So we have Lalo, and we're doing a few minutes just to sort of frame the importance of the election, and then after that we'll do we're gonna start all over again and do a kind of lightning round to get two issues that have been discussed relative to the communities that you're talking about, and two issues that have not been discussed. But first, Lalo.
All right, well, I've always been pissed off, even since I was a teenager, is kind of when I woke up politically. And I've sort of, you know how they say, like, Barack Obama evolved, and, I always say, like Mitt Romney, his opinions don't evolve, they revolve, right? But, I grew up on the border, and my family are Mexican immigrants, and, my mom never voted, and my dad died when I was little. But I always knew that it was very important for anybody that's got any sort of civic responsibility, and I'm just speaking for myself as being part of the Latino community, that we have to work hard to make sure that those that don't get represented, which could be our family members or new cousins coming up from Mexico, or whoever in our neighborhood, even the people that don't vote or will never vote, we still have to work to help them out and at least try to give them a voice, even if they don't want to, because you just got to do it. Now, I've evolved over the years as far as when I was in college. I think I've never been of the kind of I've been in too many mechas. I was at San Diego State Mecha, two of the craziest mechas, San Diego State Mecha and UC Berkeley Mecha. So I was the guy that made the flyers for the meetings, But I don't think there was ever a time where we ever felt like we shouldn't vote, And what's curious to me as far as like this election, that I think for myself, I've come kind of to middle age and responsibility and family, and I still feel the same. It's very important to vote, and I've left a lot of my friends behind that don't feel it's very important to vote, that the system's game, et cetera, and have witnessed a new generation of people, the dreamers, who could beat almost any U.S. citizen on a civics test if they still gave them, because I don't think they even teach civics anymore in high school, and I'm not sure, here and there. But it's just interesting to see how even these people that even at this moment cannot vote are the the quintessential responsible American citizens. And so I was a big radical, I thought, maybe back in the day, and now I have a daughter that does baton at football games, and I don't know if that's very Aslanista or not, you know. But I'm comfortable with it, and I still, my day job is doing this, is really being an opinion person, getting to express myself through political cartoons, through satire, through Twitter. I have a very good friend that is kind of a minor sensation on Twitter, Mexican Mitt Romney. And I don't know if you guys ever heard of, if you are ever on Twitter, go to @MexicanMitt, follow him. He is definitely, he was named by Politico as the funniest fake political parody account of these elections. Nobody had to be bribed or anything to achieve that. Mexican Mitt is, he's Mitt Romney if he were truly a Mexican ranchero, and a foul-mouthed, oversexed, polygamous Mexican ranchero with a golden sombrero. He's really good friends with Vicente Fernandez, you know, they're like practically cousins. So these are the things that I do to try to engage people in the political process by, to those people that don't want to be in it, or also the ones that are struggling and being warriors. I give them something to laugh at, but also give them ammunition to explain it to, you know, their tia or their homie or whatever. So I just recently, I'll wrap it up, I did a cartoon that was a little more depressing than I usually have been lately, which is, they came out with the stat of a record number of Latinos eligible to vote the number, you guys probably know the number better than me, but it's around 24 million or something like that. And we're still at 50% of the people that actually do go out and vote. So I guess those would be the likely voters everybody's already talking about. But since we don't have a PowerPoint here, I will draw a mind picture for you. It's a crowd of people, and it just says with a big fat label, you know, eligible Latino vote, and then there's one guy sticking his hand out, and it says actual Latino voter. And you know, the numbers are probably, the image is probably skewed, but it's meant to illustrate the fact that probably not enough are voting. You know, it's not 50%. I'm not doing a bar graph for an actual PowerPoint, but I'm trying to illustrate and to get people up. And so that's why I think, to me, selection's important, and the last one was pretty important too, and the one before that was important. So, thank you. And I'll vote for the guy who can clear up the traffic on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Well, I think we all know what D stands for, right? Democrat, R Republican, I stands for Indian. And people always ask me, how do Indians vote? Which way do they vote? Are they Democrats? Are they Republicans? Are they conservative? Are they liberal? Are they conservative socially? Fiscally, are they liberal? And we're a difficult group to pin down because we're so diverse. If you think about it, we are tiny little nations within a state, within a nation. Each one of our tribal communities has their own government with their own executive branch, their own legislative branch, their own judicial branch. And we have true democracy, where every vote counts, and pretty much with most of our tribal communities, as long as you're 18, you can vote. True democracy is pretty scary. Because if you have the largest family, guess who's always in power? So we understand how the system works. We didn't invent it, it was imposed on us. The whole voting system imposed on us in the early part of last century. And it's something that we're learning to deal with. But there are several issues that American Indians are struggling with. And one, I think you got a good example, we're the invisible minority. You heard some stats from my good friend, and you'll have to tell Stuart, you met me. Stuart Quo and I sat on the Verizon board for over 10 years together, and you would think Stuart would know better, because one of the big issues when we were on the board is they never counted Indians. They never counted Indians. And let me just give you some real life issues on stats and populations. And I'm going to use the Verizon example. When we were on the board and we represented various groups, They brought the Indian on last. Every other group was represented, including elderly, including groups like Hmong, including groups like Russian for California. And they brought me on last, and it was the white liberal attorney in San Francisco that said, "What about it, the Indians? And who has the lowest telephone penetration numbers in the entire United States? American Indians. Who has the lowest electrical connectivity in the entire United States? American Indians," but overlooked. If you're not collecting the data, you don't know that there's a problem. And I'm sitting on this board, and a death occurs, and this, I believe it was 2002, and on a reservation near mine. And what happened was there was a car accident, and there was two young girls. The older daughter, who was 19, had passed away, and her father, who was on tribal council, actually drove up to the scene and saw his two girls there. They couldn't call out. Their cell phones don't work. The girl died. The number one reason why young Native people die in this country is due to accidental death. And a lot of it has to do with no accessibility to good hospitals, good health care, things of that nature. That was a good example. So next board meeting, I go into Verizon and I am so pissed. You know when you're so mad you cry, kind of pissed? And as a woman, you don't want to give them that position, but I was so mad. This young woman died. They could not call out. Her father had to witness it. And Verizon had no idea that that was their service territory. There were no telephone lines there. And I said, this is why you have to collect the data. Numbers matter, okay? That is the major issue for American Indians. We are overlooked. We are overlooked by this government. We are overlooked by our other communities. We are overlooked by the media, and we're only brought into play when someone needs something. Here in the state of California, we are one of the largest job creators. I don't hear people using that phrase when it comes to American Indians, but they usually have their hand in hand now asking my tribe and other tribes for support. Although we're 1% of the population, we hold some of the stronger political and economic power in this state, but you wouldn't know it with our high school graduation rates. We have the worst high school graduation rates. You wouldn't know it with issues of sacred sites, religious freedom. That is the other critical issue for me and members of our tribal population that I talk about. Sacred sites, lands. The largest landowner in the West, the federal government. You've all heard about that XL pipeline? We have two candidates running for office. We have one candidate in office who has successfully kept the XL pipeline at bay. However, I'm starting to see him move towards that pipeline. He just caved in? And then you have Mitt Romney, who on his same platform talking about upholding tribal sovereignty and the government-to-government relationship. What's the first thing he's going to do on day one? Approve the XL pipeline. How can you, in the same breath, say that you support tribal sovereignty, yet that pipeline is going to come through tribal lands? Okay? So we're not even talking about the American Indian issue. We had 161 American Indian delegates at the last DNC, the most that we've ever had. I don't even want to tell you the millions of dollars that were contributed. You can look it up online for how we're contributing. I've been participating in Democratic politics for a long time. I used to be the advisor to the Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante. I didn't advise him to run in the recall, by the way. That was not my advice. I was the first American Indian advisor to the Lieutenant Governor. And I've been the vice chair for the Native American Caucus for the California Democratic Party for 12 years. Do I think the Democratic Party, do I think they have the answers? No. But they have a platform that somewhat includes us. However, like I started this conversation, there's D, there's R, and there's I. And as American Indian people, we know it's about issues for us. Who is going to support our issues? We have some tribal governments issuing vote cards now, and we can do that. And they'll say who to put on your slate. And some of those are Democrats, and some of those are Republicans. We are an issue-based population because no one group looks at our constituency and says there's real power there. But because of tribal government gaming, the opportunity to play in this pluralistic field of politics has now opened an avenue. Because money does talk, but it's not enough. So what tribes are doing is building relationships and collaborations and advocacy groups. The American Indian, Native American Caucus for the California Democratic Party didn't get started by the Latino group or the Asian Americans coming over or the disabled group saying, hey, you guys should get involved. It was the Irish American Caucus. You would never have thought that one, right? The Irish American Caucus that said, we have a similar history of this colonization. I never would have framed it that way. But that was the group that came. So you never know who your friends are going to be. On the same breath, I had Jesse Jackson himself tell me that I was the prettiest little squaw he ever did see at the 2000 Democratic National Convention with Robert Kennedy's coat over my shoulders. He said that to my face and then kissed my forehead. So the politics of inclusion are critical when it comes to American Indians. We may be a small population, but we are a valid population. Our history is your history. We're often referred to as the miner's canary. You know, when they send the canary into the mines and the canary doesn't make it, it's not safe. That's how they've used us. So don't be in a silo and just worry about your particular populations. We're all in this together. We bleed red. So I just want to leave you with that in that sense that for American Indians, it's a politics of inclusion. We are here, we are still here. And second area is the issue of sacred sites, land. You are on Indian land. Respect it and protect it. Not because we tell you to, but because the earth is finite. This is it, folks. Respect it and protect it.
You folks know the good cop, bad cop routine, right? You got a suspect in the room and the bad cop goes off on the suspect and threatens to blow his head off if he doesn't cooperate, and then the good cop comes in and says, pushes the bad cop out of the room, closes the door and says, here, have a cigarette, let me get you want a cup of coffee? Let me get you a cup of coffee. You know, I want to keep this guy off of you. He's a madman, but you gotta help us out. You know, cooperate with me. I'm on your side. Just give us what we need, and everything will be cool. Well, the Republicans and the Democrats play that kind of game on us, right? They play the good cop, bad cop. While Obama talks about, did suspend the XL pipeline, he's allowed the southern part of that pipeline to go ahead. Now, does that make any sense, to allow the southern pipeline portion to go ahead unless you plan to let the other part of it go ahead later on? So you have, this politics of inclusion that the Democratic Party does. They play the good cop. They appeal to people who are concerned about injustices. They appeal to people who side with the underdog. They're either the underdog themselves or they side with the underdog. And then what the Republicans do is they appeal to those people who identify with the executioner, the top dog, right? And that's how any population is going to kind of break down along those lines. So if you're going to control how far things go in the political arena, you have to provide the good cop, bad cop, version, or as we have in professional wrestling, you've got the bad cop, the bad wrestler, and then you've got the good one. And as Jesse Ventura said after leaving office, and he should know, right, because he was a professional wrestler, he said a couple things. He said, one, after he got elected as governor of Minnesota, because they made the mistake of allowing him to participate in the debates. right? Because Coleman thought, oh, I've got a 40-point lead in the polls. He's a libertarian. I may as well he'll take votes away from my opponents. So he let him participate in the polls. And everybody was so surprised at how candid Jesse Ventura was, that he got a lot of people who don't normally participate, because Minnesota allows you to register on the very day of the vote. And you got a lot of people coming in, and he gets, in a three-way race, he won. And he said after he got elected, some guys in suits came into a room with him, closed the door and said, how did this happen? Because we want to make sure this doesn't happen again, right? And the other thing he said after he left office, he said, politicians are like wrestlers. They're like the direst enemies in the wrestling mat, and then afterwards they go out like best buddies and have dinner with each other, right? So that's a little insight to this, game that we have going on here. You wanted us to address the two things, issues of color? Is that part of this first round?
It may or may not be.
May or may not be. I have an option here. Okay.
Two that are talked about, two that haven't been.
Two that have been talked about and two that have not been talked about. Well, let me talk about first what has not been talked about. And, there's a lot that hasn't been talked about, obviously. One of the things I mentioned at the beginning, and I mentioned mass incarceration of minorities, and blacks in particular. That has not been talked about in the presidential elections. It's not on the table. And stop and frisk, the policy in New York City of stopping people because they are black, simply because they're black. The cops will stop you. And that's not been talked about. Obama's election was treated and still is being treated as if, somehow we've turned a corner on race, and yet you have Oscar Grant, you have all these other people being executed by the police, people of color. And, Obama's not said anything about stop and frisk. He's not said anything about mass incarceration. And the immiseration that's going on, the kind of desperate, which both hits people of color and white people, because the largest numerically numbers of people who are impoverished in this country are white. But it disproportionately affects minorities. So those two things are not being talked about. What's been talked about, as far as I can tell, is, you hear the talk about opportunity, right? Opportunity, as if there does not need to be a working class, as if everyone could somehow magically disappear out of the working class and everything would run and everybody be middle class and upper class. We could all sell pizzas, and that's not being talked about. And another thing that's not being talked about, is really shameful in that last debate where they were both competing over who would be the best, user of drones and modern weapons of mass destruction. But the narrow nationalist perspective, if you will, of you are Americans, and then we can continue to consume and don't have to worry about global warming, and we're going to get more jobs, and we're going to use energy, all of the above, And so I'll leave it at that.
I'm looking more forward to the I'm looking more forward to the question and answer part, so I'm going to make mine short. You asked about two things that has been talked about and two things that hasn't. Obviously, there's a lot of things that hasn't been talked about that I would like, not just the presidential, but even the local elections to address. But, that's the thing about politics, and I think they alluded to it before. You have to actually win to make the decision. To be in the decision-making power. So when they go to the debates, when they do these commercials, when they do all these things for you, they target it to what it is that's going to make them win, or who they need to appease to. Like, for example, California's a blue state, right? No matter what happens, it's going to be blue. So it's really hard to energize our base here and tell the people here, yeah, you got to register to vote and vote, because you're not going to see that many campaign commercials here or whatnot, because it doesn't excite anyone. They focus all their attention on what they call the battleground states, Ohio and some of these, Nevada, some of these other states. So, and then when they do their talking points and all of that, they specifically tailor it to get those swing voters. Because if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal, then they automatically got your vote. If you're a conservative, then it doesn't matter. But you're not going to vote for Obama. You're either going to vote for Romney or probably stay home, but they're going to do whatever it takes to get you out, right? So they don't go for what you need, but they go for those swing voters. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, I wish they talked about this, this, and that. But if they did, it might make me happy, but it might cost them the election. So I mean, you know, it's something to ponder on. I'm not saying what if that's right or wrong. I mean, that's what politics is. It's about compromises, and I don't know how much compromise you're willing to take, but that's what the election is. So but one thing that with all of this talk, with all of this, what has this system has created is, and it goes to Dr. Proudfit, what she was saying about inclusion. I mean, I could probably say exactly what she said, but just delete in American Indian and put Asian American. And I'm sure Latinos could say the same. I mean, you name it, which group, LGBT, I mean, just fill in the blank. So, but what our election system has created is a two-party system, and like what Dr. Liu was saying, it'll be, I'm really concerned about how the major parties are going to start outreaching to include, right? Like for Asian Americans, they're, pretty much leaning a little bit more Democratic, but it's majority leaning Democratic, a third Democratic, a third I guess a Republican, but more leaning Democratic, and also a third decline of state. So and that's a trend for not just Asian Americans, but for all groups. Everyone's becoming decline of state. So there needs to be a way for the I guess the main party systems or whatnot to try to outreach and try to get us more involved. And and without that, like in the state of California, because it's so blue, it tends to have minority groups. It's like the poor fighting the poor, right? You pit the poor against the poor. So you have minority groups fighting each other when we should be together. But that's the nature of power and that's the nature of politics. So I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but it's just something that for everyone to ponder on and figure out.
Really? Okay. Well, I was going to say I often come up, as the optimist, but also as the realist. When I'm online, as I am too much, and I get stalked a lot, and I get a lot of trolls that just want to try to convince me that my opinions are wrong, when all I do is give the same opinion that I've had inside me for the last 20 years and for the remaining 20 years, or the future 20 years. And that Latinos should participate in all parties. That's fine. But and that Latinos are naturally conservative, and I'm sure African Americans hear this all the time, and that we should not be. I love the way that the Republicans, what we call campaign to Latinos. They go, "Don't be so stupid, you dumb zombie. Vote for us." That's not like a really good way to show some something. I mean, I know you
want them to be subtle.
I don't mind if they try to grease my palm. I mean, at least I know what's happening. That's what politics is, and I have to come back and say, I have a special case because I went to Berkeley, and a lot of the state, a young Latino state political officials that are out there right now were, at least my generation, my friends, or, John Perez, this assembly speaker, was my roommate at Berkeley, and Jose Huizar was my friend at Berkeley, and we partied together at Wolf House, and if somebody knows what that reference is, that's hilarious. But for me, Latinos, the reality in California, we're so far ahead of other states as far as demographics and of what the country's going to look like, that we're kind of living this kind of of Latino participation now. I mean, it might just be blooming now, but with so many Latino elected officials here, I mean, I just look at people that tell me, you know, you should be, you know, voting for this party that has zero of your interests, you know. But I look and I say, you know, I think we're kind of being included, at least, you know, at least Latinos are rising up and taking these positions. You know, they're like working, they're in the ground game. I know a lot of political Latino nerds that have been out there hoofing it for years, and they're starting to come in their own, getting school boards, and it's just, you know, I've always been the pessimist, but now I'm being a little tiny optimistic. So excuse me, you know, if I'm not as sour as I should, as I normally am, you know. I'm kind of like Chicano Clint Eastwood, you know, get off my lawn. You know, but so I'm not going to be the curmudgeon today. I'm like slightly hopeful, you know. And one more thing is a thing that I've always get in an argument with people is about term limits. And you know, I think it's just like a thing foisted on us because as a member of a minority group, I need politicians that are going to be, I don't care what color they are, I need politicians that are going to service my community and they're going to build up power. And I don't care if they are like, you know, building an extra nice spa for themselves because they've been in Congress for 40 years. As long as they're like working for my community and they built up power and, over those 40 years, I mean, I don't believe in term limits. You know, I just do not, because my community needs, you know, these long-term relationships with political leaders, whether they're just kissing our butt, just throwing us a bone. I mean, it's a bone is better than a rock, let me tell you. So, all right, that's all I got to say.
Lalo, Willie Brown and Charlie Rangel are singing your praises.
Yeah, man, I'm down with my man Willie. Man.
Yeah. No, I mean that's what brought us term limits to stop Willie. So I have like a whole bunch of questions for all the panelists, but I've also heard what they've said, so I can kind of take the spirit of the questions and do what I want, because that's what happens when they let me loose on this kind of thing. So I'm actually going to start with Dennis. I have a real question, and I think I actually want a lot of the issues that have circled around the panel have been this idea with some level of frustration with the electoral system, with issues of invisibility, but a willingness or thoughts about how to engage. And so a lot of my questions that are going to follow through the panelists are going to be aligning around how do we as different communities think about engaging. So I'm gonna shift frames on Dennis a little bit, and this may be a little unfair. So I'm Sandra. I have 2 kids. I'm a single mom. I work in the garment district. I'm a diabetic. I collect food stamps. My kids use Medi-Cal. And I don't have a lot of time for political information. I certainly don't have time to camp out in tents with college kids. But I want to vote, and I do think that I want to try and make a difference. I can't sit around waiting for revolution. I have kind of immediate needs. How am I supposed to participate politically? Where is the movement, or how can these movements more effectively speak for my issues? Because I didn't necessarily hear Occupy Wall Street speaking for Sandra. I heard a lot of complaints the number one issue I heard was fairness around student loans. Student loan forgiveness. Sandra doesn't have student loans. She didn't finish high school. So she's trying to make a way for herself. And so where's the movement for her? What is the level of engagement for her? And how should she think about the political system in the upcoming election?
Sure, appreciate the question. You know, there were actually Sandras and people like Sandras in Occupy. It wasn't just college. It isn't just college students. There's a sizable portion of people who are homeless and street people, other people who come from all kinds of walks of life. And I say this because my current research project actually is on Occupy. So I've interviewed a lot of people, and students of mine have interviewed a lot of people in a lot of the different Occupies, especially Occupy Wall Street, but also on the West Coast. And so I would argue that the main issue wasn't student loans. I mean, obviously, as everybody knows, there's lots of different issues that Occupy is occupied with. But I'd say the overriding theme of it was economic inequality, right? They're talking about how unfair and unjust things are, and that has a lot of different dimensions to it. You know, objectively, I would argue, you know, that people are reacting to the inequities of globalization and, you know, capitalism, and that's what they don't all see it that's where it's coming from, but that objectively is what people are up against. So while when I'm talking about the need for structural change and the need for revolutionary changes, I'm not saying that's something out in the distance. I'm saying that is something that has to be struggled for in the now. That, you know, I've been around a long, actually I'm older than I might look, hopefully. I'm not so different from my actual age as I used to be, but in terms of appearance. But anyway, you know, I was around, I cut my teeth politically during the 1960s. And so I've been around, but the first time I had a chance to vote, I was really excited about it. I wanted to vote for George McGovern because he said he'd end the war, you know, and I thought he would. And then it turns out, you know who ended the war was Richard Nixon, right? A Republican ended the war. Why did Republican and then Ford after him actually finish the withdrawal of troops? Why did that happen? It was because of the movements of the day. It's like I was saying earlier, it doesn't matter who's in office, it doesn't matter their political affiliation. What matters is what kind of a force is there out there among the people, you know? So it is a trap to think that what Obama has done is, and he's extremely skilled at this. He's I have to give him kudos for this. He's extremely skilled at this, rebranding things and presenting to people an impression that he's on your side, right? And yet doing things to, like I didn't mention this yet, but what's happened to civil liberties? You know, the fact that torture is now accepted in this country. He has rebranded these kinds of things. He's the one that actually introduced the idea of drones. You folks, if you were watching this at the time, in 2007 when he was running for office, he proposed that drones should be used in Pakistan. And Bush's first response to this was disbelief. He says Obama wants to declare war on an ally. And then a few months later, Bush secretly started using drones. So this idea started with Obama. So, you know, I think we have to tell people the truth. And, you know, do you know who Cindy Sheehan is? Folks know Cindy Sheehan, right? She single-handedly decided, as a mother of a killed soldier, to go and try to confront Bush in Crawford, Texas, and say, come out and explain to me why my son had to die. And she galvanized people by doing that in ways that, and that's why she's been vilified by those who oppose what she stands for, you know, because she's such a moral figure. So Sandra and people like her need to act in ways that actually reflect what we actually confront, and that elections themselves don't, you know, what I would, you know, Glenn Ford described Obama as the more effective evil. I would say that Obama, and I agree with that, but I would also say that what Obama is the more subtle evil here than what Mitt Romney represents. But you know, this is what I talk about in my book, that over the last few decades, the whole direction of politics has been towards the embrace of the free market, of market forces. That both the Republican and the Democratic parties are embracing this. And if you understand that that's what's afoot, then our path I'm on the steering committee of World Can't Wait, which is an organization devoted to exposing the crimes being committed by our government and fighting against them. So that's, movements like Occupy, movements like World Can't Wait, people acting as, we have a lot of power as individuals, actually. A person of conscience who stands up, and refuses to go to the back of the bus, right? That kind of thing galvanizes people. And there are people who want something else. They're not even aware that there is a choice beyond having to choose between the Republicans and the Democrats. There is a choice. And that is the one that will actually make a difference, is to speak out about what's really going on. And and look beneath the surface at what we're seeing, because there's all this, spin that happens about what's going on. And people know from their own experiences that it doesn't quite match, but they need to be given an alternative picture to it so that they can sum up their own life experiences and see how they don't have to look at it with these narrow range of choices.
Just a quick follow-up. Does voting preclude Sandra from engaging in those other activities?
I'm not going to take a line, my position is that if you vote for the Democrats, you are in fact legitimating what they've been doing. It isn't just this notion that there's a lesser evil. You are saying, I am okay with the suspension of civil liberties. I am okay with the use of drones, which has killed thousands of people, only at most 8% of them actual so-called militants. The rest of them have been innocents, right? I'm okay with all of these measures that have been taken, and I'm legitimating it by voting. Now, if you want to vote, it's a hard-fought right? It's a hard-fought right, and the Republicans are trying to suppress voting because they would rather have their people in office than the Democrats, because they really do have partisan battles with each other. So, it's a complicated thing that you want to fight for the right to be represented, but at the same time, you got to be sophisticated enough to understand that avenue by itself is not going to get you what you really want.
Okay. Here's one for Jolie. Given the kind of invisibility you discussed in terms of American Indian and Native communities, what do you see as the future of Native communities' participation in the political process? What are the means and levers and specific ways in which they can be creative in terms of getting their issues on the agenda and affecting the political process in positive ways?
That's a good question, thank you. I just got back from 3 days in Sacramento. Tonight is the last night of our National Congress of American Indians annual meeting. And we had Governor Brown there. We had Ken Salazar from the Department of Interior, United States Department of Interior there. And we come together once a year to discuss critical issues from every category. Well, we have a campaign that's ongoing called Native Vote. And our goal is to register at least 1 million American Indians to vote. Our good friend Senator Inouye from Hawaii has told us year after year after year, if you all just voted in mainstream elections like you do in tribal elections, you may be able to make an impact. Because we vote in our tribal elections in the 100th percentile or close to it, because we know how serious they are. And so the issue for us is making the non-Indian world and issues relevant to us. Because for far too long, we have really kind of talked about the outside world as just that, walking in two worlds. The outside world, we don't have any influence, they don't care about us. And we've been sold that, we've taken it in, we've digested it, and now we're kind of preaching that to our children. It doesn't matter, what do they care? They're not interested in Indian issues. It's almost like this invisible border around the reservation. Anything inside the reservation, right, doesn't seem to matter. But we really saw our political change and influence really in 1998 here in the state of California. For the first time ever, an ethnic minority passed a proposal, an initiative a statewide initiative with Proposition 5, and some of you guys are too young to remember 1998, but Prop 5, we spent about $100 million to pass a tribal gaming initiative to allow us to have casinos on tribal lands. Even though that was federal law, we had a governor that refused to follow federal law. And we knew that even if we passed that initiative, we would lose in the Supreme Court. But we took the gamble, no pun intended, passed the law to prove a point. We proved a point. The new governor comes into play. He says, these folks are serious. We mobilize. The African American population were extremely pivotal for Prop 5. You're probably thinking, what do they have to do with Indians or casinos? Not necessarily a lot, but they had to do with social justice, the struggle, the ability to have American Indians be able to participate in this system. And so we worked with the owners of Black newspapers who were so influential and helpful, Asian American newspapers, the gay community, you name it, we worked with them, right? That was in 1998. Then in 2000, we passed another initiative. We spent another $60 million. And so we proved to our community, if we work together, if we get out there and vote. That was the first time my mother had voted, 1998. Because she never thought it mattered. We were mobilizing. We had election parties at the Biltmore, just where everybody else has theirs, right? And so we were a part of the system. I remember the night in 1998 when we won that election. We had a tribal chairman from San Diego at the election party at the Biltmore, and then he took a helicopter to fly home to be in his tribal reservations to celebrate with his tribal members. And the image that made for young Native people, that significant image, how important that was. I don't even want to know how much that cost, but he wanted to be with the folks in LA who really helped our people, who were not just from our community, and then he went back to be with his community. So we have to mobilize. We have to let our people know that it does matter. Here's where it matters. Obamacare. What does it have to do with Indians? It permanently reauthorized the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act. It was just floating. It had not been reauthorized in years. So it's extremely important to us. Joe Biden, 2 months before they got elected in 2008, I was on the phone with Joe Biden, and he personally said to myself and other Native folks who were on that phone call, I am your biggest advocate against violence against women. I will do, and this administration will do whatever it can for VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. And Native women across this country have been extremely pivotal in passing VAWA and making sure that the issues related to violence against women are addressed. That hasn't been reauthorized. If this administration does not come back, that probably does not look good. Indian education, or education for all. This administration has held listening sessions all across the country to hear from American Indians. They haven't been perfect, but at least they're listening. This is the first time any presidential administration has ever done that. And I have my issues with the Obama administration. They know what those issues are, trust me. But this administration has done more for Indians than any other administration. And the administration before that did the most, Nixon. So when I said there's Democrat, Republican, and there's Indians, I'm not kidding. But what we have to do is let our Native people know it matters, it's important, and we need to do a better job in breaking it down for them. We need to do a better job. I'm going to give you an important phone number, and I want you guys to all write this down. 1-866 our like our people, our vote. This is for everybody. If you have problems voting, right, you call that number. That's real time. There are going to be people available to address any concerns that you have. If you have any problems. What I'm not seeing from the various communities, and I'm not seeing from our candidates, especially the Democrats, what are they doing to target young people who have moved all across the country? What are they doing to target folks who've been foreclosed upon? When you move, right? You have to re-register. We're not addressing those issues. And so, you know, I do think that these are some critical issues that we're going to face in this state. And so we have to do a better job to mobilize our people, to get our people engaged, let them know that this matters. And that's what we're doing with Native Vote to try to register 1 million American Indian voters.
Thank you. Lalo.
Yes.
Political humor, political communication. I'm of the opinion that the left has been awfully bad at it for most of our time. But we're getting better.
At humor or communication?
Well, you're good at humor. They were still bad at communication. No, but how do you see the two things coming together, right? That political humor, particularly on the left, as being a central part of political communication and shifting. We talked a lot about public opinion, its role in shifting public opinion, and if you could, I'm going to throw another bit of a curveball to you. You could talk about the role of social media in disseminating it as well.
Sure. Well, of course, you know, we all see The Daily Show, and we're all, you know, I mean, 10 years ago, this stuff was not as, you know, permeating in the national consciousness. Political satire, you know, was kind of like, I grew up with Mad Magazine, so that's what screwed me up, you know. But for me, you know, satire is another language, and it helps your critical thinking area in your melon, you know, and I that's what I try to push to young people, and you know, without beating them on the head, you know. It's like I try to, you know, I'm not just as a practitioner myself of political satire, I'm not just wrapping the headlines in candy so that they go down, you know, smoother. I am doing that. But I'm really just trying to get people to think, you know, without telling them, I want you to think critically about this issue, because, you know, once they get past the entertainment value, and if there's a little, you know, meat in there, you know, that is the most effective way of communicating that idea. And that's why, like, right-wing comedians are not funny, because I just came back. Last month I was in DC at the editorial cartoonist convention we had, and I was recently on C-SPAN talking about this with two conservative cartoonists. You know, it's like we were kind of talking at each other, and they couldn't gang up on me. I kicked their asses, but the funniest stuff that they had when they had funny cartoons, it's stuff that was like almost like mainstream jokes. It was like you know, stuff that poked at both sides, you know, fair and balanced. But you know, I would put any of my stuff up, and my stuff was brutal, but and it would just leave them shaking their heads like they wouldn't know what to say, because there was truth in it, and it has to be truthful, you know. And I think that's what when ads, you know, fall flat, when the political messages fall flat, it's because there's, you know, like Obama said, Mitt Romney's a bullshitter, right? He said in Rolling Stone magazine, he came out and said it. And because don't bullshit a bullshitter either, you know, like you can see it, it's so obvious. But so when you do an ad where it's the evil sheep are eating you know, it's just like the stuff doesn't make any sense, because it's not true. And that's why right-wing comedians are just unfunny, because they pick on poor people and people of color and women, and they think that that's hilarious, and that's not comedy. That's like, you know, frat boy talk, you know. It's apologies to any frat boys here. But did I totally just get off message there? Or am I an effective communicator?
You're quite effective. But also, how has social media changed how you disseminate what you do?
Yes, very good question, because lots of my, you know, I've been doing my daily comic strip for 10 years now. Before that, I mean, I've been doing editorial cartoons for 20 years. When I first started, I was faxing them to papers so that, you know, to self-syndicate my cartoons to people. And then the internet came, and I learned about scanners and all this stuff. And now, so many newspapers have gone away. So many of my clients have gone away. But I'm using social media and the internet to get not only to get my ideas across and my political messages across, but also to get paid. And also whether I get a nickel for a cartoon that pops up on Huffington Post or something, or a client that pays for it, or a gig out of just being a notorious funny jerk that does funny pictures. So for me, social media is great. It is it's like a megaphone for my stuff, and I beg people, please share my stuff all the time.
Okay. No, thanks for that, Lalo. So David, so we've had kind of, at least the way I think about it, is sort of two models of politics. So one is, or maybe three. So one is just exit, protest, and then maybe we'll build a system that we like. Another is kind of engage the system where it is, and you kind of propose that, well, in the end, the system's really going to cater a few swing voters in Ohio. How is it, especially here in California, how is it that the communities that you've talked about most drastically, in particular, given sort of nature of the two parties, et cetera, how can they take over the Democratic Party and move it in the direction and begin to use it as a megaphone for the issues that you think, and make electable the issues that you think right now, if you talked about, wouldn't be electable? What would be your, would you think about this? Is this a way to go?
For any one of the issue groups or people that we talked about, whether it be American Indian or Asian American, to I guess influence or take over the party, as you say, it would be to show up. You just have to show up. Decisions are made by those who show up. So whether it's in the form of protest, like you said, or whether it's in a form of voting, you have to show up. And the example that you gave earlier about Sandra, it's in that case, most likely Sandra's probably Latino and non-citizen if she's working in the garment district. But let's say she is, no matter how busy she is, she needs to register to vote and vote. I know it sounds unfair, and that's why I don't want to sound too partisan here, but with all the faults that the Democratic Party has, they do represent, from the two parties, the people who are unfortunate and disadvantaged. That's why you see all these partisanship politics where there's when we talk about voter suppression, they're trying to make it where, I don't know, they close the polls earlier, or they require you to have to a general person you would say, yeah, sure, I'll bring my ID, what's the big deal? But it is a big deal to certain people. And those certain people happen to be the less fortunate. So they do whatever they can to make them not show up or reduce them from showing up. So, if you want to make any change, it seems unfair, but you have to show up. And, the problem with our system is we don't have enough resources for all the needs. It's like you have a dollar to plug a $100 hole. And what's more important? You have someone talking about cancer, how it's very important, and it is very important, cancer research. Then you have someone else saying, no housing. Someone else will say homelessness. Who's right? Foster children, mental health. If you have a dollar to plug $100, where do you put it? Education, right? And that's the problem, and that's why if you don't like the system, and if you don't like how it's working, regardless of what it is that you don't like, whether it's globalization or some big issue or small issue, you have to get involved. And if you don't like it, you got to change it. And get involved not just by voting, but run for office. If you don't like what it's done, it could be an armchair quarterback, or you could actually do something about it. And it's difficult. I'm not gonna make it sound easy, but it's difficult because just as much as I'm passionate about my issue of, let's say, mental health, you're gonna have someone else who's just as passionate about American Indian Native rights. Who's more right? It's just a matter of being able to deal with all the wrongs.
So with that, I'm going to begin to take questions from the audience, and for the different panelists. I'll take a couple of them at a time so that we can.
You're lucky. There's a lot of people left. So you
Yeah.
could actually ask.
Oh, wait.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I'll try to shout. Not asking anyone to predict the future, because we don't know what's going to happen, November 6th, whatever the date is. But what about January, after whoever is sort of is sworn in next? Regardless of whether it's Obama or Mitt Romney, what happens then as it relates to some of the issues that we've been talking about today? I'm just curious to kind of hear from each of you, sort of like, the two different scenarios, like what the implications are for some of the social justice issues we've been talking about, and what you think that we should be doing, or we should be doing. I mean, assuming that voting is not enough, that you cast your vote, it's not over at that point. I mean, what's the next step? So, I mean, whoever wants to kind of jump in, I mean, I kind of want to hear from each of you. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm just curious.
I just wrote a piece for NBC Latino about 3 weeks ago. I think it was 3 weeks ago. I met President Obama at the Cesar Chavez Monument dedication. And,
The Hugo Chavez Monument.
The Hugo Chavez, yeah. I also did a joke on that. I had my list of things that if I could stop time and talk to him for half an hour at least, and I had a little list of things that I would have talked to him about, and I'm not going to bore you with the whole list. It's everything. I mean, I'm not a one-issue person, but I kind of am. I mean, immigration is my issue, and I think whoever is in, I mean, if it's Mitt Romney, I mean, good luck. But I think I want to pester Obama now and say, okay, now it's time to pressure him and pressure his opponents to create some kind of immigration reform. And yeah, it's boots on the ground, it's pressure. For me, it's public opinion. But that's what I'm gonna try. I'm not sure exactly how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna support my brothers and sisters, especially the Dreamers, in pushing some kind of immigration reform. But that's my thing.
You, Mark, in the introduction of me, you mentioned my first book, Impeach the President, the case against Bush and Cheney, and as you also mentioned, we didn't do it, right? But because we didn't do it then, we weren't able to mobilize a big enough movement to repudiate what Bush and Cheney had done. And Obama came forward and said, I will undo all of that. And the electoral path is the way to go to bring about change. And so that's what happened. And if there had been a movement and Obama had been elected or McCain had been elected, then either one of them wouldn't have been able to go as far as they have gone down the wrong path, because there would be a viable social movement in the streets opposing what they were doing. And opinion would have been raised about what these crimes are, instead of allowing them to get away with, suspending the rule of law, basically. The executive branch now can do whatever it wants. There's nobody supervising it, And when you breach that wall and say the rule of law, they talk about the rule of law, but everything that they're actually doing is suspending it, then we're in very bad place, an extremely bad place, and people have to come to real grips with that and recognize where we are and what it's going to take. So, I joke that not enough people read my book at the time, and so we have to deal with the situation we have today. But I would say, no matter who gets elected, the issues still remain. And that the solution to that is mobilizing people and creating a different political atmosphere, because that's what's really key.
Oh, Troy, you can go before I ask.
Go ahead.
Oh, just to kind of follow up on what you're saying. So you think that agitational politics is kind of the way to go?
Yes.
What would that look like today? because I assume that it would have to evolve somewhat from what was maybe going on in the 60s or what's been going on to be more effective in today's times, dealing with all the different distractions that college kids have, which are usually the people who get involved in agitational politics. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, when I was in college, there weren't as many gadgets to buy, and there weren't, everybody didn't have to be working all the time or taking out loans to go to school, right? So the college generation of today has a burden that people in a previous time didn't have. And you're also right about the distractions, that there's a tremendous amount of distractions, and being on the internet too much actually changes your brain. They actually looked at that. But it's kind of interesting, when Cornel West and Cornel West and no, the speaking tour, Carl Dix. Carl Dix. Carl Dix and Cornel West came, they've been on a nationwide speaking tour, right? And I came to hear them here at UCLA. I was like 3 hours early. I thought, we'll show up an hour before. And I come and show up an hour before, and it's like there's people everywhere. And I never got in to hear them, And the same thing, only even more so, happened at Berkeley, And so, and I want to cite something. I did my master's work on China in the 1989 movement in China, what's popularly known as Tiananmen, but it was all over the country, right? Massive popular uprising against corruption, against inequalities, and so on in China. And shortly before this thing erupted like that, there was a survey done of the Chinese students, college-age students, and the surveys concluded that college students in China were very apolitical. They weren't concerned about politics, right? So there is nascent, in nascent form, if you do the right kind of agitation, you set the certain kind of examples, it will resonate with people. But you have to bring it out. It's there, but you have to bring it out. And this is something, I study social movements. I participated in social movements, and I study them. And this is one of the things that you learn from history if you read history, right? Is you find that, first of all, the powers that be tell you this is the way you have to go, and the powers that be have an interest in not telling you what really works, right? And that's why, they have this saying at the time of elections. Every time we have elections, you hear this saying, it doesn't matter who you vote for as long as you vote, right? And when I first heard that as a teenager, it doesn't matter who I vote for as long as I vote. Well, then what's the point of voting, right? If it doesn't matter. But actually, they're right. It doesn't matter. The idea is to get you to participate, to make you think that you have a say-so over this, right? Because what really matters is, as you were saying, I think you put that very well, agitational politics, right? And they have what elections do is they take off the table things that they don't want people to talk about or even think about. And so it gets narrowed down that way. When Ralph Nader was running, when Gore and Bush were running, and Nader was running for president, they changed the rules so that they made it such that Ralph Nader couldn't participate in the major debates. Because imagine if Ralph Nader had participated in those debates with Bush and Gore. I mean, Bush would have looked like an inarticulate idiot, even more than he normally is understood to be. So it would have changed the whole dynamics, right? It would have changed the whole dynamics. And that's why the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is half Republicans and half Democrats, manipulated that way to keep off the table the things that they don't want to talk about. So what's on the table now? Cuts to Medicare, privatizing Social Security, right? That's the consensus of both the Republicans and the Democratic Party. And so we have to put onto the table, and that's what the social movements of the 60s did. They put on the table things that the people, the powers that be, did not want to have on the table. And that was why that period is so important, right? and has these kind of repercussions. And there's been a revenge against it ever since. You know, the people in power have tried to undo everything that was done in the 60s because they hated it then and they've hated it ever since. And they're trying to suppress it so much because, you know, my book, Globalization and the Demolition of Society, came out a month before Occupy Wall Street. But in my book, so I didn't see it coming, but I did see it coming in the general sense. I say in here, a movement of people against this, you know, of what's going on has to come forward, and that's what really is promising here. And these other paths, you know, they're false. They're like chasing after that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The Democratic Party has to appeal more to the disenfranchised because there's this division of labor between the two major parties. But if you think about it, we are an imperialist power. We are the greatest imperialist power since Rome. What would you expect the two major parties to be like? Would you expect one of the two major parties to be really that different? You know, to really challenge the powers that be? You know, they don't, they won't. And so we have to be more sophisticated. At the same time, when people are demanding certain things, you know, the system will give you reforms if you put enough pressure on them, right? So around issues like you've talked about, you know, and others here have talked about, yes, you put pressure on the people, whoever they are in office, but don't pin your hopes to thinking that they really care about us, because they don't. You know, the only people who care about us is us, right? And the people, that's the missing ingredient, the mobilization of the people as an independent force on the scene. That's what has to happen.
I think David had.
I don't know where to begin. Dr. Liu, I agree with a lot of things you're saying, but I also disagree. I mean, I don't want to get into a philosophical or a social anthropological argument here because that's, you know, I mean, I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified for it. I mean, it just because you hit on so many different points. I mean, when you say your vote doesn't matter, I mean, I understand the cynicism, and I sometimes living in a blue state like California, shoot, does my vote really matter? Honestly, I do think of that too. But at the same time, if you, based on the arguments that you're saying, if you say your vote doesn't matter, then you're saying basically your general argument is the world's going to hell in a handbasket, which a lot of people, you know, tend to say that argument. And if that's the case, if my vote doesn't matter and I know the world's all going to go to shit anyways, then, you know, why should I participate? I should just do my thing, get as many little gadgets as I can, be as rich as I can, live my life, you know. I mean, right, if it doesn't matter, right? I mean, no, I'm not saying it.
But that's not what I'm saying, that it doesn't matter.
Right, so I mean, I'd like to say, I mean, if you don't vote, it gets worse. I mean, democracy is not a perfect system. Democracy is an imperfect system for an imperfect man. I mean, depending on which philosopher you go by, Hobbes, whatever. I mean, and you said it yourself. You know, man, I agree with a lot of things you're saying. I mean, but then you could get into issue overload. You know, I mean, if we think about so many things, I mean, we can't save the world. We're only one person. We could only do what we can do for ourselves and our neighbor and our community. So there's only so much you could do. And I mean, democracy is it allows, and like you said it earlier, you said you know, the only person who cares for ourselves is ourselves. I agree with you on that. I mean, you know, whether you look in the Bible, the Torah, or, you know, all the philosophers, they say, you know, man is selfish, man is, you know, we're selfish in nature. And if that's the case, democracy allows, you know, our system, or, you know, I'm not saying it works perfect, but, you know, you have our system of checks and balances, and yes, you know, the executive branch has gone super powerful over the years and whatnot, but it's still the only system in the world, the system where we could actually criticize the president, the Democratic Party, who go against everything. We could disagree with the whole system, and we're allowed to do that. And we could organize people, like-minded folks, to go against it. Only the United States, with all our faults, and I agree with all the colonialism and all of that in the past history, but only the United States of America are we allowed to do what we do. So if you don't vote, it gets worse. I agree the system is flawed. There's so many things we need to fix in the system. That's why we need to get involved. And just to make it simple, we're not going to become president tomorrow. And maybe it's not presidential politics, but Dr. Proudfit said it earlier, all politics is local. I mean, yes, it matters, who becomes president and all the big changes that happen, but I agree with you. Even if Mitt Romney became president, yes, even though he says he's going to appeal Obamacare, it's going to exist in some form. Because it exists already, Medi-Cal, it exists. I mean, the system exists. And that's a whole other argument. There's racial overtones about what real national health care really is. But it's what you do. Get involved locally. I mean, try to focus and try to figure out what issue is important to me, is what one issue that I can make a difference in. And most of the time, it's local politics. Get involved. I mean, after November, what happens in January? There's a huge, right now in the city of LA, a lot of people don't know this, but the city council, half the city council is transitioning out because of term limits. And I disagree with term limits too, but I have to admit at the same time, it's giving a lot of new chances for a change. Half the city council, mayor, I mean, the entire local structures could change. And LA being the city that it is, whatever we do in LA goes California, whatever happens in California goes the nation. I mean, this is the incubator for change. I mean, if whatever it is that we want to do, you can get involved. I mean, small things, get involved with your local PTA or get involved with your homeowners association or whatnot. See what issue it is that is important and make that one change. And I mean, I have to believe in that. I mean, I was in politics, I believe in that. I mean, call me naive, but if it wasn't for that, then I'd quit tomorrow. If I thought it was hopeless, then why are we here, right? Why do we even study these things? And that's the other thing, education. Sorry to ramble, but education is key. We have to educate ourselves. And look at the budget, right? They're cutting, education always gets cut on the chopping block. I mean, we talk about, look at all the statistics. We're one of the lowest ranking in the nation, in the world, all over. Education is key. We have to educate ourselves so we can get more involved.
So I'm going to go to Jolie, but just a point, the far right started their movement by getting people elected to school boards.
That's right.
Right, and built from there, and then started getting people on the local party boards and took over the Republican Party and drug it and built a political communication infrastructure.
They also moved to, I'll make this very brief because I know you want to say something, but they also moved to repeal the fairness doctrine because they knew they could not build Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and the rest of these people who have an undivided platform without getting rid of the fairness doctrine. So they, at the same time as they fought on the grassroots level, on school boards and everything, they were very clear on what matters most, which is public opinion. And so they've built this, this huge multi-billion dollars of money they put into media so that they could put their agenda before the people every single minute of the day. And so that you've got, and they knew where the real power is. It doesn't matter who's in office. If they're determining what the interpretive frame is, that they get their way. Because
Politics of fear.
Yeah, politics of fear is part of that. So I'm not hopeless at all. I'm very optimistic, but I think we've got to understand what we are facing. But
Well, I have a lot of titles. I'm a business owner, I'm a mom, a professor. But one of my favorite is political operative. And the first time someone publicly called me that, I was a little frightened. I thought, oh, am I going to get in trouble for that? And the first time I went up for tenure, and I've been tenured 3 times. I'm the only person I know in the CSU system that's done that 3 times. I'm younger than I look. I've been teaching for 18 years. I called myself a academic activist. And I was in the College of Ethnic Studies, chair of American Indian Studies, and people said, don't use that word. And my Native American colleagues who had went to very prestigious universities said, it's ridiculous. You're an academic. And they said it just like that. You're an academic. My mentor and person who was on my dissertation committee was Vine Deloria Jr. And he was very politically active. And he wrote a book called Custer Died for Your Sins. If you've never read it, read it. I'm sure the American Indian Studies Center has a few copies they'll let you check out. He was a professor here in the early 1970s. And he, in that book, talked about the civil rights movement. He wrote it back in late 60s. He talked about the civil rights movement, and he talked about American Indians understanding the narrative. We are first and foremost a political group, and we need to assert our treaty rights, and we need to assert our political status if we are going to be around for the next generation. And we're barely learning that lesson. It's been 40 years since he said those words. But to go further is we need to do it together. This 99% group, they didn't speak to a lot of folks that I talked to. Indians were like, those are some dirty white people out there. So the narrative and appearance and public relations matters. It matters, folks, because we need to feel that we are included too. And just like the narrative has changed to, what do Indians have problems with? They're rich, they got casinos. That is the minority, not the majority. The majority is still living in poverty. So we need to control the narrative, how we want to see this world go forward, this country go. We need to step up. We need to work together, right? We need to collaborate. We need to say, when we're talking about healthcare, it's not just for women. It's just not just for young people or old people. And then, you know, all the color lines that go with that. We really need to work together. And it always interests me, some of these issues, how people really compartmentalize things like the environment and co-opt it. But this is a tactic we've seen over and over and over again, and we've seen it in the us category. I've seen my own folks be co-opted. I mean, some of the issues that we've been working for, they get put to the side because we then focus on economic development issues. And I'm like, hey, what about the education issues? So rather than me as this, you know, professor, academic activist standing on the fringes saying, you know, hear what I'm saying. Because I know how important those educational equity issues are. You know what I did? I put together a quantitative report at my university paid for by one of those tribal gaming tribes. And I used a report that the Asian American community had done a few years ago. My good friend Stuart Quo, who great with statistics, and he knows that those statistics are the only thing some of those white folks up in Sacramento and DC understand. And so I followed his model and I put together that report. And guess who got invited to the Department of Ed meeting? Oh, so let's hear about those graduation rates. Yeah, because you didn't know they were happening, right? No, now I have proof. Now I have proof. And guess what? Now those tribal leaders have something to take in when they're talking about those economic development strategies. I can say, hey, you know, when you're cutting those checks for hundreds of millions of dollars, it's not a tax because they can't tax us, we're governments. Mitigating monies, maybe you can say, have some accountability. So we have to look at playing politics in a way that better serves us. We have to hold others accountable. We have to work collectively instead of separately. And that's something I've been doing for a long time because I know my population is too small. And even if we weren't, it's so much easier learning from people who have maybe learned some lessons, you know? Maybe they've come around through the front door or the back door and they can say, hey, this is how we did it. And I can tell you there's nothing scarier than a group of folks that are well coordinated, highly articulate, got lots of bows and arrows and other things, and they're sitting at the table in the big girl and the big boy chairs. Now that is power. So I think we need to change the narrative, have the politics of inclusion, but we have to start with each other, right? We have to work collectively, and let's start with some big issues, whether that's healthcare, that's the environment. Start with a human rights platform. Because the last time I checked, we were all human.
So I'm going to give Lalo the last word, then I'll...
Can I just say something real fast? I'm currently about to vote in a local school board election where I live, and one of the candidates who didn't win the last time, but she's going to win this time. You guys have seen the famous picture of Dolores Huerta on the car. Well, she's standing up, holding a sign up, and it says "Huelga," and the lady who's running for the local school board. That's her dad's car that she's standing on the trunk of in the famous photograph, and she's a longtime UFW activist. And here we are together. We're like parents at the local elementary school. You know, we're like, you know, two Chicano activists. All of a sudden, we're like, you know, our bread and butter issue is like, you know, fix our school up and make sure it's good. You know, it's like, so I think there's lots of, you know, you can focus on whatever, you know, whatever floats your boat, man. You know, the NDAA or local school board election. I mean, it's there for you. You know, take it, you know, and run with it.
So it sounds like the synthesis here, if we have one, is that regardless of how the election works out, that significant pressure is going to be need to applied, and that pressure and people power is going to be need to combined with more sophisticated strategies of providing information and political communication to move public opinion and change hearts and minds in ways that can affect the issues that we all care about. And it seems like that's the consensus around that kind of emerged. And I want to thank the panelists for coming out. Everybody give a round of applause. I want to thank the IAC and all the center directors for putting this on. And hopefully this will serve as a great archive for people to open up the day after Election Day and get a blueprint about what to do. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. Thanks.